Welcome to the newest episode, a midweek edition of Beatin' and Bangin'. I'm your host, Kyle Dalton. In today's video, we're going to follow up on a story from Monday's video where I discussed what Kyle Petty had to say about Denny Hamlin after the race in Atlanta. Hamlin responded to Petty's remarks on his podcast this week, and Dale Jr. offered his thoughts on the topic on his podcast and didn't agree with Hamlin. Jr. also talked about Hamlin and his 23XI Racing organization's position in the charter negotiations and made an interesting admission about Hamlin while offering his prediction on when he thinks 23XI Racing might sign the deal. Sticking with charter talk, I'll also discuss the remarks Rick Hendrick made yesterday on the topic during the announcement that Kyle Larson will attempt the double again in 2025. And finally, in our By the Numbers segment, we'll have our weekly last 5 races analysis. And then I'll have a detailed breakdown of Todd Gilliland's numbers in 2024 and how they compare to 2022 and 2023, because Sunday's start at Watkins Glen will be his 100th in the Cup Series. The 24-year-old got candid and shared his thoughts with us on the achievement. However, before we talk about Gilliland's milestone, let's go back to Sunday's race at Atlanta and the performance of Denny Hamlin. After hanging back in the pack for most of the race and finishing 24th, everyone paying attention was questioning the driver about his strategy. Here's what Hamlin had to say about it in his post-race interview.
I just tried to avoid the wrecks, and obviously I was trying to get 20 points out of the day. That was my goal, is just get 20 however we could. Obviously starting in the back, didn't help.
Moments after he made those remarks, Kyle Petty shared his thoughts on the matter.
Who goes into the playoffs saying, I want to get 20 points in the first race? I've never heard anything like that in all the history of when we've had playoffs. I just want to get 20 points. I'm going to ride back here. So I'm more confused now than I was before I heard him speak.
Well, unsurprisingly, on his Actions Detrimental podcast, Hamlin discussed his strategy and specifically addressed Petty's remarks.
Yeah, I think teams are smarter now than what they used to be, and certainly not saying that this was the right strategy, but it was the one that I wanted to employ on the day. If 20 points, I don't know the last time I scored 20 points on a super speedway race. It's been so long. I'm trying to make it to the next round. I'm trying to get to some of these tracks where team, driver, all those things make a bigger difference, and it's not a Russian roulette of whether you get caught up in a wreck or not. So data and analytics, while I understand it wasn't around back in his day, it is now. And if you're not using it, then you're a dinosaur. So I'm just trying to use the information at my disposal to make the best decision. It doesn't mean that I'm always going to make the right decision. And you could argue that certainly it was not the right decision. But who's to say?
Yesterday, Dale Earnhardt Jr. joined the conversation and offered his personal perspective, which interestingly included disagreeing with Hamlin and defending Petty.
Kyle Petty ripped him up. Kyle said, man, I've never in my life, in all of my years, heard a guy go, yeah, I'm just trying to get 20 points today. Yeah. And Kyle's right. Kyle's right. I know there's a history there. They've had that problem at Dover that people think that there's still a little bit of a rift between these guys. And Kyle's been critical of Denny in the past, but Kyle's right. Listen, I've rode in the back at Daytona, Talladega. I've tried that strategy. I've failed. I don't know. It might have worked once. It didn't, I don't know, but so I feel like I've got enough experience and have made enough mistakes to be able to comment on this, much like probably Kyle Petty as well, right? People give Kyle a hard time when he gets critical and has a hot take, but Kyle Petty's been around the sport for freaking ever. Mm-hmm. And he's seen a lot of You don't have to be the one actually climbing the mountain. If you watch enough people go up it, you can figure out kind of how it gets done. And so maybe Kyle doesn't have a championship or all these wins, but he's been around and watched enough of this sport and observed enough racers and people doing things to understand, how to give a reasonable take. And so I feel like he's kind of spot on here.
But that wasn't all Earnhardt had to say about Hamlin. Later in the podcast, the conversation shifted to the charter negotiations and how 2311 Racing was one of 2 teams to hold out and not sign the deal last Friday. That's when Earnhardt made an interesting admission about Hamlin.
I could not believe this came down the way it did, but apparently, right, everybody signs the charter agreement except for 2311, which is not a big shocker. Front Row also didn't sign, which is a shocker. And so Denny's listening to this, and he's going to text me all the reasons why I'm wrong. But we always have when I talk charters, we always have a Denny Hamlin conversation later in the week. But I was really, really surprised that the teams split. Now, I felt like when they started meeting with NASCAR individually, that NASCAR had gained the upper hand, right? If the teams are all going to band together and really have leverage, they had to stay together, right? And so when NASCAR starts meeting with them individually, that was going to erode at the trust and confidence and teamwork that the RTA had. And a lot of their leverage as a group went away. Now, Denny and 2311, they believe they have all this leverage, and their leverage has not changed, and that's fine.
It's actually not surprising to hear that Hamlin talks with Earnhardt about charter negotiations, considering their relationship at Dirty Mo Media. But Earnhardt is right, and Jeff Gluck and I discussed it during our conversation earlier in May about NASCAR's divide-and-conquer approach with the teams. It obviously worked. After a lengthy discussion on charters and where it's headed, Junior also offered a prediction about when it might come to a conclusion and revealed another piece of info on Hamlin.
Denny's hard-headed. I don't see Denny going sometime, in a couple weeks going, all right, we're signing it. Yep, we were signing. All right. Well, we're done fighting. I just don't see. He's such a, he's hard-headed. He's going to fight. He's going to stubbornly.
He don't back down.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And he's empowered, right? He's got Michael Jordan. He's got all this, he's got a lot of people that all believe in that building that they're doing the right thing.
It's interesting to hear Earnhardt talk about Hamlin being hard-headed, especially when set against the backdrop of what Rick Hendrick had to say about the charter negotiations yesterday when asked about the subject during Kyle Larson's announcement that he will attempt to run the double again in 2025. Here's what Hendrick told the AP. I think we worked really hard for 2 years, and it got down to you're not going to make everybody happy. And I think it got down to I was just tired. Not everybody was happy, but in any negotiation, you're not going to get everything you want. And so I felt it was a fair deal, and we protected the charters, which was number one. We got the revenue increase. I feel a lot of things we didn't like we got taken out, so I'm happy with where we were. Hendrick's comment on being tired was the big headline, and justifiably so. He could have just said, you don't get everything you want in negotiations. It was a fair deal, and I'm happy with where we were. But he added the whole tired comment, which wasn't by accident and clearly an indication he was worn down from the back and forth between the teams and NASCAR. Also, according to the AP, Jeff Gordon shrugged about the decision to sign the charter agreement and noted how Jim France had individual meetings with several top team owners, which Earnhardt mentioned in his podcast, and said most teams felt they were never going to get a better offer from NASCAR. And now it's time to move on to our By the Numbers segment. And we're going to first talk about our regular topic we discuss every week, and that's our last 5 races analysis. And I have to say, it's incredible to me to see who's at the top, and that's Kyle Busch. However, before I show you that, I want to go back to a video I did on July 31st, or just a little over a month ago, and show you Busch's numbers from them. Take a look at that. Abysmal at 25.6 with 4 finishes of 25th or worse. That was before the Olympic break. Now, looking at the latest last 5 races and since the Olympic break, Busch has unquestionably been the best driver as far as average finishing position is concerned, and by a lot. He sits at the top at 5.4 with his last 4 finishes inside the top 10 and is 4 full spots ahead of the second place driver who he dethroned from that said top spot, Tyler Reddick, who is at 9.6. The number 45 pilot has been solid with one exception, that hiccup at Daytona where he finished 28th. Rounding out the top 5 are Christopher Bell, Ross Chastain, and Brad Keselowski. Others worth noting are Kyle Larson in 22nd, who has an average finishing position of 20.6 with his issues at Michigan and Atlanta. And look who is at the very bottom, Martin Truex Jr., with all of his last 5 races ending with results of 24th or worse. I have to wonder if he isn't just ready for the season to be over and to get out onto the water and do some fishing. And we'll wrap up our last 5 races analysis by looking at Todd Gilliland. He's not had the best run of late with an average finishing position of 24 even after finishes of 36th at Michigan and 27th at Atlanta. But these last 5 are not reflective of the driver's overall 2024 campaign. Taking a look at his numbers this season, you can see he had his struggles early on, but kicked it into another gear at Talladega. In that 11-race stretch, he recorded 7 top 15s, including 3 inside the top 10, a best of 7th on the streets of Chicago. His best run of the season came a couple weeks later at Indy, where he finished 6th. All of it combined equals an average finishing position of 19.9, which is better than a couple of playoff drivers, and Harrison Burton at 25.9 and Austin Cindric at 20.2, as well as his front row teammate Michael McDowell at 21.1. Unsurprisingly, this year Gilliland has led a career best 126 laps. His previous best was in 2022 when he led 11. As I mentioned in the intro, this is Gilliland's 100th Cup Series start. And when you go back and look at his numbers from his rookie season up until now, you can see he's shown marked improvement each season in every important metric, including those laps led, as well as top 10s, average starting position, and average finishing position. He's clearly a driver on the rise and has a bright future ahead of him. So what does the young driver think about making his 100th Cup Series start this Sunday at Watkins Glen?
Just thinking about making my 100th start this weekend. It's pretty cool. Obviously, right, when you're at your first one, and for my first Daytona 500, I thought, that was the coolest moment ever, getting to achieve that and race in the Daytona 500. And now, right, getting to start 100 more Cup races, it's really, really cool. The difference I feel, right, showing up at the racetrack, how much more competitive that we've gotten recently, makes a big difference, and just super excited to still be around and hopefully to many hundred more starts ahead of me.
Did you hear that? He's still excited to be around. He knows how hard this sport is with his father racing before him. By the way, his stats are better than his father ever had in his career. But you can sense how grateful the younger Gilliland is for the opportunity and how he's looking forward to 100 more. Based on his performance and steady improvement over these past 3 seasons, there certainly is a lot to look forward to. All right, guys, that's a wrap on this episode. I want to get your thoughts on all of it. I want to hear what you thought about Denny Hamlin's response to Kyle Petty's remarks and Dale Jr.'s response to Hamlin's actions at Atlanta. Also, let me know what you thought about Earnhardt's remarks on Hamlin being hard-headed and why he thinks the charter negotiations won't be resolved anytime soon. And lastly, what did you think about our By the Numbers segment this week with Kyle Busch being on top in our last 5 races analysis? And let me hear what you think about Todd Gilliland's young career. What does his future hold? Any wins? Thanks as always for checking out the latest video and supporting the channel. I read all of your comments and I really do appreciate all of your feedback. And I hope you have a great rest of your day.